I love children's literature, and it seems anything you want to teach, you can find a book, a kid's book, on that topic, and you can use it as a springboard to help kids learn. This is especially true for social-emotional learning. There is a power in using stories. And one mistake parents make is thinking they need to read a book as it was written. Today's guest brings us into her journey into authorship and then shows us how to take the story beyond the book. If you wonder how to use a piece of literature to enhance the learning, listen in. Terri Lilga shares some great ideas. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dinalynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned. Because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Hello, listeners. I'm so glad you're here today. Before I begin, I'm going to read a review from somebody in Italy named Gear Junkie 1. So if you're listening, Gear Junkie 1, thank you very much for this 5-star review. Gear Junkie titles it, Parents, You Can Do It With Your Gifts. And writes, before I listened to this podcast, I was merely curious because I have clients with kiddos who are on the spectrum or who have challenges communicating. What a treasure trove I found. Listening to this feels like a big hug. Parents, you can be yourself and tap into your kids' authenticity too. I felt really inspired to open up to what is possible. The insights are brilliant. It's upbeat, but real. Thank you so much for sharing this wisdom. You're welcome, Gear Junkie. You made my day. Thank you for this review. And listeners, if you have been meaning to leave a review, go in the show notes and take a look. You'll find a quick link to subscribe and follow, or to leave a review, and even to leave me a voice message with your thought, comment, or question. That is found in the show notes right below this episode. We have a milestone to announce, and that milestone is that we have passed 20,000 listeners. That is so exciting, and please continue to share and subscribe because no parent needs to muddle through on their own. This information is accessible, and I want to make it accessible to any parent anywhere. And we have been worldwide. And this week, I want to thank the parents in Oman, Thailand, and Qatar, because apparently those 3 countries, I have been in the top 10 within this month. So that's just really fun and super exciting. Now, parents, if you are wanting to make a big change in your child's life, maybe your child isn't speaking very much and you know they should. Maybe your child is very difficult to understand and you think you could really help them if you just knew how to teach them sounds. I can help with that. That is what I do. And if this is you, we can do that together. Look down in the show notes and you will see a strategy session, and you can book yourself for a strategy session with me, and we will discuss how I can help you get where you want to go for the benefit of both you and your kiddo. And I would be so honored to do it. Now let's get into today's episode with Terri Lilga. Today we have the privilege of having Terri Lilga here. She is an author and she wrote Santa's Simon in 2023, and now there's A Hubbard in My Cupboard was released in May of 2025, so recently. And I have the privilege of reading this book, and we're going to talk about it today. It is absolutely lovely and really hits kids where they're at. So thank you, Terri, for publishing this book. Thank you for writing, and thank you for being here on The Language of Play.
Thank you for having me. The book was really exciting and fun to write.
I bet it was. So I have the book here. This is so cool. Now, there's a Hubbard in my cupboard. Obviously, on the title, you've got some rhyming. And I love that you have rhyming. You know, anybody that's been listening for a while knows that, we talk a lot about phonemic development and phonemic awareness, as well as phonological. And there's a Hubbard in my cupboard aligns so well. Can you tell us how come you started this book?
I have a long history of writing. I started writing when I was a child myself. It was something that I enjoyed doing, and it was a go-to for me. And mostly, I enjoyed writing poems and poems that rhymed. I love the language of rhyme. I love the challenge of putting words together that makes sense, not just for the sound of it, but that actually makes sense. I love developing that into something else. It wasn't just poetry. I did write short stories as well. And I continued that pretty much, into my teenage years and then get more formal with school things. But then I always had this desire to at some point write books for children, and that basically materialized more when I was a young adult, like in my early 20s. I would write manuscripts and put them aside. I was focusing on becoming a teacher, and I did become a teacher. And I adored being a teacher, and I did teach elementary level kids, and mostly like a second grade level. So those are like 7, 8-year-olds. Being so immersed in literature as we were and the writing process, and in our district, the reading and writing process were very much integrated. I had so much exposure to different literature, and that informed my writing, but it also made me more motivated to want to write. Just solidified the fact that I think I can do this. This is writing children's books is something I want to do, and I think I could be successful at it.
Well, I will agree. I very much agree. This is a lovely book. One of the reasons I love it so much is that you are really targeting the sound systems for our
Mhm.
kids, the developmental sound system. And you said that you were in education. Would you tell us a little bit about how you understood the sounds and sound systems? What made this so good in your mind?
So, getting back to the whole reading, writing process, our school district was very, very, very focused on that. And we had a lot of training in it. I mean, over and above what you learn in your college, preparation courses and learn about learning. We had a lot of workshops. We had a lot of collaboration with teachers. It was something that I was constantly concentrating on. How do you make it better? How do you get kids to understand it in a deeper level? How do you
Mhm.
get kids to engage in language, the written word, of course, in reading, and then how do they transfer that to the written word that they compose? It was, a very integrated process. Personally, I've always been fascinated by language, and I've always been fascinated by different word groups and sounds of words. I
Mhm.
think that's my affinity to rhyming so much is that if you could think of words in a texture, it's almost like a certain texture of words that I'm very drawn to. My first book too, Santa Simon, is rhyming. For both books, one of the things I was very conscious of was making sure that, of course, that the content made sense, but I wanted it to be rich. I didn't want it just to be rhyming, or to put a rhyme in there because it worked. I
Mhm.
wanted it to be meaningful.
What is it that you want the kids to learn?
Of course, it's a really kind of a fun story. There's a very peculiar problem that the boy and his dog face in their house. I guess one of my biggest teachable moments in that book is problem solving and creative
Mhm.
problem solving and using your imagination to see things differently, thinking outside of the box. Again, the Hubbard's a very peculiar situation. They find the Hubbard in their cupboard in their kitchen.
Mhm.
And it's a very impy, kind of naughty creature. He's not harmful at all. He's just likes to, create a little havoc. And they're like, well, you know what, this isn't working for us. We need to get this thing out of here, but how do we do it? And one of the interesting things too is that the main characters, there's only basically two characters you meet in the book, and that's the boy and his dog Beatnik. The dog can't communicate verbally,
Mhm.
so how do they communicate? That would be
Mhm.
something I would love to discuss with, the kids is, well, they seem to know, they get plans together and they execute these little plans. How do they really know what the other one's going to do? How does the dog really understand what the boy was really, what his next step is, for example? So how do they communicate?
Here on the language play, we talk all about communication. And you
Yes,
show
that-
emotions and body language in the book in ways that kids are going to, the child understands the dog and the dog the child.
right.
And when we watch our children interact with animals, they sometimes have no sense at all, of course, but
Right.
sometimes you can see that understanding, that connection. I think pets can be really good towards our children and probably a little better than our kids are towards them. Generally speaking, until they've learned. But you can still see that connection, and
Yeah.
and you maximize on that in the book.
Yes, our puppy is 4 years old. And we were always very fascinated by how she communicates with us. You know,
Hmm.
she lets us know what she needs. She lets us know what she wants. She absolutely lets us know what she doesn't want. And that, like, even through this book, I've like focused on that more. The whole communication thing I focused on more. And I like that you brought up about the emotions because that is another like rich thing about literature. The kids are introduced because you have so much of a variety of literature when especially when you're teaching the younger kids,
Hmm.
and they meet so many diverse characters that are facing very odd situations sometimes that they have to overcome. So you can have really very insightful and meaningful discussions with kids, very young kids even, about the characters' emotions. And through
Hmm.
discussing the characters' emotions, a lot of times kids can start to get in touch with their own emotions. So
Yes.
there's that carry through. Once you point it out to them, or they come to that conclusion, or you lead them to that conclusion, they start to just recognize it on their own, the character emotions, and how does this relate to me?
Right. Right. I love it. And I love that you've got the frustration showing in the book, like what's going on with that Hubbard, what's happening, and the confusion, and then the plotting. And you see real good facial expressions that show unity with that dog and the boy, and then the
I know.
confusion and shared confusion. Yeah, it's very good as they problem solve. Now, I want to also talk a little bit about rhyming. A lot of times parents ask me, well, what are some good books that we can read to our kids? And this would be one of those books that would be in the category in my mind of Dr. Seuss, Mother Goose, because
Right.
of the sing song nature of the lines. That sing song and that rhyme pattern is something that fortifies and builds up the sound system of a child that is the building blocks towards reading and writing later on. It is also
Absolutely.
the building blocks towards talking and understanding.
Yes.
So, when we read books like these, like your book, we are building that sense inside the child because that is part of that early developmental pattern. So even though the concept, the thought in the book pertains maybe to a 7-year-old kid for
Right.
behavior, for the problem solving piece, but even if your 2-year-old is listening or your 1-year-old, they are picking up on patterns of language, like you talk about the texture of language. And I love that expression. It's certainly suitable also for 2-year-olds, and this is one of the reasons I love it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a pretty universal type of writing, genre, if you want to call it that. And it's kind of interesting, even feedback from adults I've gotten, like they love the rhyming. I've had
Mhm.
that views like love the rhyming. I was so fascinated by the rhyming and it works and it makes sense and that kind of thing. And it's just been one of my affinities. And as a child, I like the rhyming too, in terms of listening and writing.
If we were to talk about like what you're doing in the world, it seems that you are encouraging creative thinking and
Yes.
imagination,
Yep.
connection, communication, language. Would you say that's right?
I would say that's right. Yes.
Are you doing it through any other means or just the authoring at this point?
Pretty much just the authoring at this point.
Because you don't teach anymore, is that correct?
I'm retired, yes, but I have to say that it was very huge with me as a classroom teacher. The whole social emotional learning thing, I'm very fascinated with that. I always have been, although when I first started out in teaching, there really wasn't a name for it.
Yeah.
There wasn't a category for it. It wasn't considered essential, if that
Mm.
makes sense, because you think of the academics as the reading, writing, arithmetic, science, with a big focus, which it should be, but there is the whole child. I've always been a component of the whole child. You're not just teaching a brain, you're teaching a beautiful living human being that's coming in and they have emotions and they have family and they have opinions, even though they're
Hmm.
little, they have a
Hmm.
lot of opinions, they have a lot of insights. So those things, what they come into school with, first of all, are they coming in happy? Are they coming in with a positive attitude? Are they coming in from a safe environment? Those things all absolutely contribute to how their day's going to go, how they're going to learn. That has also transferred from my whole classroom feeling about that. That's transferred into my writing too, because I always try and write books that have teaching points about like kindness or courage or
Mm,
confidence
good.
and resiliency and things like that.
Yeah, the things that fall in that social emotional category that make or break a school day and that
Yeah,
can make or break a kid's ability to learn on any given day.
right.
Well, this is fabulous. Thank you for this book. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the audience, whether it be about your work, about books, or something that would be your final thought?
If you have children in your life, don't underestimate the power of literature and the connection that literature can give you to the kids, even in terms of sharing a book together, discussing a book together, doing both,
Yes.
sharing what your favorite books are. And I would hope with my books and any books that the kids like and you like, to take the story beyond the book. What else can you do to reinforce that story and whatever enjoyment you've gotten out of whatever maybe lessons, quote unquote, you might learn from it. And again, to contribute to language development. There are things like imaginative play, pretend play. Take those characters that are favorite characters from a book and pretend you're having them over for a little lunch or tea party or something like that. And what kind of a conversation would you have with them? What would they want to tell you? What if you ask them, tell me something about yourself? I know this from
Yeah.
the book, but what else could you tell me about yourself? You could make a story box and put some of the events from the story just on little sheets of paper in a box and pick one out at a time and just retell the story that way. Have family circle story and each member adds on to it. That those are kinds of things you could do. Do a little project from the book, make a puppet show. And again, not even to buy them, make the puppets, do all this stuff that really stimulates their creativity and again, you're involving problem solving and choices and conversation.
Those are fantastic, wonderful ideas that really enhance a child's understanding of the literature and expands that language that they hear in the literature into their daily life so that they take that vocabulary elsewhere. I think those are wonderful. And I'm going to encourage you to think about putting those in your book. Those are great ideas. And,
Yeah,
like maybe add a page of parent ideas. Those are really good ideas.
I love that idea. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for sharing your book. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge.
And again, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.